Karen Carpenter's voice remains one of the most memorable of the 20th century, warm, emotive, and instantly recognizable. Alongside her brother Richard, the Carpenters became one of the defining musical acts of the 1970s, known for timeless songs like Close to You and Rainy Days and Mondays. But beyond the music and acclaim, Karen's life was shaped by personal challenges that weren't always visible to the public. For many years, the more private aspects of Karen's experience, including her health, emotional well-being, and family pressures, were rarely discussed in depth. Richard Carpenter, her musical partner and closest confidant, has typically remained reserved when it comes to those painful memories. Now, at 78, Richard has begun to share more openly about that chapter of their lives. In this video, we'll take a closer look at his reflections, offering insight into their unique bond, the impact of fame, and how Karen's legacy continues to resonate today. How Karen Carpenter's 1960s rise led to a life-changing record deal. Karen Carpenter's story begins long before she became one half of the iconic music duo that would come to define a generation, with their soft harmonies and heartfelt ballads. To truly understand the rise of this legendary voice, we have to go back to where it all started. In 1950, Karen Carpenter was born on March 2nd in New Haven, Connecticut. From the beginning, her life was steeped in family and music. While her early years didn't immediately hint at the massive talent that would later emerge, the foundation was being laid in the form of a supportive home environment, and eventually, a relocation that would change everything. By 1963, the Carpenter family made a move that would be instrumental to Karen's future. They settled in Downey, California, a place that would become both the physical and emotional base of operations for the Carpenters' rise to fame. The move to California exposed Karen to a broader musical culture and more opportunities for growth in her burgeoning interest in music. In 1965, Karen joined the Long Beach State Marching Band. Unlike many young girls interested in music at the time, Karen gravitated toward percussion. She was a drummer first, a passion she pursued seriously, and with undeniable skill. Her time with the marching band honed her timing, rhythm, and musical discipline, skills that would serve her well in her later career. But it was also during this time that Karen began performing more actively with her brother, Richard Carpenter. Richard, a gifted pianist and arranger, was already pursuing a career in music. He and Karen quickly discovered that their talents complemented one another perfectly. Richard's compositional ability and Karen's unique vocal tone combined into something magnetic. What started as casual collaborations between siblings soon evolved into something more structured and ambitious. Together, they began crafting a sound that blended Karen's warm contralto voice with Richard's melodic and harmonic vision. As the duo continued to perform and record demo tapes, they caught the attention of several industry professionals. But it wasn't until 1969 that the major turning point arrived. Herb Alpert, the co-founder of A&M Records and a respected figure in the music world, heard one of their demos. Alpert was immediately captivated by Karen's voice, its purity, its emotional depth, and its distinctive sound that seemed to resonate deeply with listeners. That year, the Carpenters were officially signed by A&M Records. It marked the start of a new chapter, not only in Karen's life, but in American pop music history. Their signing was more than just a business deal. It was a validation of the years of hard work, late-night rehearsals, and the unbreakable bond between brother and sister. The duo's style, which combined soft rock, easy listening, and meticulously arranged pop, stood out in a music scene dominated by psychedelic rock and Motown. Karen's voice provided the emotional center of the music. Whether singing about heartbreak, longing, or hope, her delivery felt intimate, as if she were speaking directly to the listener. While her brother handled the majority of the arrangements and instrumentation, it was Karen's vocal performance that left an indelible mark on the songs they released. As the Carpenters began to build their discography and rise to fame, their early years continued to shape the essence of their music. The story of Karen's beginnings, from her birth in Connecticut to marching band rehearsals in California to impromptu performances with Richard, served as a reminder that greatness often begins in the most humble and sincere of origins. What's remarkable about this stage of Karen's life is the way in which her path unfolded, not through a grand plan, but through an organic process of discovery, practice, and emotional expression. Her early foray into drumming and her initial performances with her brother weren't born out of ambition for stardom, but out of a genuine love for music. 70 and the rise of Karen Carpenter. As the 1960s drew to a close, Karen Carpenter's journey with her brother Richard had only just begun to take off. What started with small performances and growing musical experimentation was about to explode into worldwide recognition, all catalyzed by one pivotal moment in 1970. That year marked a breakthrough with the release of the Carpenters' second studio album, Close to You. It was this album that introduced the world to the soft, harmonious style that would become the group's signature. Featuring iconic tracks like They Long to Be Close to You and We've Only Just Begun, the record didn't just climb the charts, it defined a sound. The smooth melodies, lush arrangements, and emotional sincerity struck a chord with listeners across generations. Karen's voice, in particular, became the heart of the Carpenters' appeal. Her warm, melancholic tone carried a gentle vulnerability that was impossible to ignore. While many pop stars of the era relied on flashy personas and upbeat performances, Karen stood apart. Her voice wasn't just technically beautiful, it felt personal, almost as if she was singing directly to you. This quality quickly earned her widespread praise from fans and critics alike. Many began to consider her one of the greatest female vocalists of her time, but her talent didn't stop at vocals. Karen was also an accomplished drummer, something not always highlighted during the peak of their fame. In fact, she originally joined the group as a drummer, and it was behind the drum kit that she felt most at ease. Her rhythmic precision and control were rare, especially for female drummers in a male-dominated industry. Yet despite her clear skill and preference for drumming, the spotlight inevitably shifted toward her voice. It was a decision largely influenced by public demand and commercial strategy. As the Carpenters began performing on television and live stages around the world, audiences wanted more of Karen's voice, more visibility, more focus on the captivating frontwoman. This often meant stepping away from the drums and into the center of the stage as the lead vocalist. Though she fulfilled this role with professionalism and grace, the shift was not always comfortable for her. Karen was often described as introverted and shy, showing more interest in the craft than in public attention. Being pushed into the spotlight created a dynamic that, while elevating their commercial success, sometimes conflicted with her personal comfort and identity as an artist. Despite the internal tug-of-war, the early 1970s saw the Carpenters soar to unprecedented heights. Their music topped charts internationally, their albums sold millions, and they became household names around the globe. Television appearances, award shows, magazine features, the brother-sister duo were everywhere. And yet, even as the accolades rolled in, there was something quietly powerful about Karen's demeanor. She wasn't your typical pop star. There was an authenticity in the way she presented herself, poised but not performative, deeply talented but never boastful. Her voice, equal parts strength and fragility, reflected this contrast. As the hits kept coming, so did the demand for more. Songs like Rainy Days and Mondays, Superstar, and Top of the World solidified their place in pop music history. But with the rise in fame came intense schedules, relentless touring, recording sessions, media obligations, and an increasing amount of pressure to stay on top. Amidst all this, Karen's role as the group's focal point continued to grow. While Richard composed, arranged, and played, it was Karen's voice that carried their signature sound to the world. And yet, for all the success, she sometimes expressed a longing to return to her roots behind the drums, to recapture the part of music making that felt natural and grounding to her. Still, she remained committed. She embraced the spotlight even when it didn't feel like home. She sang with a clarity and emotion that belied the pressure she was under. Her performances, whether live or in the studio, rarely betrayed the inner conflicts she may have been facing. Instead, what audiences saw and heard was the pure, undeniable gift of a once-in-a-generation talent. By 1971 and 1972, the Carpenters had fully cemented themselves in the music industry. They were not a one-hit wonder or a passing trend. They were artists in their own right, Richard with his compositional genius and Karen with a voice that could soothe, stir, and stop you in your tracks. For Karen, however, It was clear that this journey was about more than just recognition. It was about the music itself, the connection, the ability to take a song and make someone feel seen, heard, or comforted. Even in the midst of growing public attention, that quiet mission remained at the core of everything she did. And so, as the 1970s continued, the world would witness more chart toppers, more awards, and more unforgettable performances. But alongside that success, subtle signs of the pressures Karen carried would begin to surface, not outwardly at first, but in ways that would eventually come into sharper focus: weight loss, anorexia nervosa, and collapses on stage in Las Vegas. Following the Carpenters' rise to global fame in the early 1970s, with hit after hit solidifying their place in pop music history, the spotlight shone brightest on Karen Carpenter. Her uniquely warm and melancholic voice resonated with millions, and her gentle presence became a defining feature of the duo's identity. However, beneath the surface of adoration and success, a quieter, more troubling story was unfolding. By the mid-1970s, fans began to notice changes in Karen's physical appearance. Always slender, she now appeared gaunt and increasingly frail. Her sudden and noticeable weight loss sparked widespread concern. Though it wasn't yet publicly understood, Karen had begun to experience the debilitating effects of anorexia nervosa, an eating disorder that, at the time, was not commonly discussed, let alone recognized by the public or the medical community. At first, the changes were subtle. Her clothes fit looser, her frame seemed more delicate. But as time went on, her visible transformation became harder to ignore. The media, quick to speculate, focused their attention on her appearance, with whispers of illness or extreme dieting making headlines. Yet behind the scenes, Karen's struggle remained largely private. She rarely spoke publicly about her health, and few outside her inner circle understood the depth of her battle. The Carpenters, still in high demand, continued to tour and record, but Karen's body was under increasing strain. In 1975, during a performance in Las Vegas, the strain became undeniable. Mid-show, Karen collapsed on stage. The incident sent shockwaves through fans and the industry alike. For the first time, the rumors that had lingered around her health began to feel alarmingly real. Following the collapse, the Carpenters were forced to cancel several tours. Officially, the reasons cited were exhaustion and illness, but behind closed doors, concern was growing for Karen's well-being. While Richard Carpenter continued to focus on their music and creative direction, Karen's condition began to overshadow her once effortless performances. During this period, anorexia nervosa was still a largely misunderstood condition. Few people, including medical professionals, knew how to properly diagnose or treat it. For Karen, it wasn't just a personal health issue. It became a deeply emotional and isolating experience. Some close to Karen have suggested that her perfectionist tendencies, which fueled her musical excellence, may have also contributed to her struggles with control. Food became an area where she exerted control even as her health deteriorated. As the late 1970s progressed, Karen's appearances became increasingly rare. Known for her warm presence and openness, she began withdrawing from the public eye. Interviews were less frequent. Photo shoots became more carefully managed. Friends and colleagues noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed quieter, more withdrawn, and often tired. Her once bright stage energy dimmed. Audiences still adored her voice, but many could sense that something had shifted. The vibrant young woman who had taken the world by storm with Close to You and Rainy Days and Mondays was now battling an invisible enemy, one that no chart success could cure. Karen's reclusiveness became more apparent during this period. As touring slowed down and public appearances dwindled, she spent more time in private, avoiding the pressures that once drove her to perfection. This withdrawal wasn't just a retreat from fame, it was a necessary step as she tried to manage her declining health and find some sense of peace. Richard Carpenter, the musical architect behind the Carpenters' iconic sound. As the world fell in love with the voice of Karen Carpenter, many also came to recognize the quiet genius working just behind the scenes: her brother Richard Carpenter. Richard wasn't just Karen's sibling, he was her creative partner, musical architect, and the driving force behind much of the Carpenters' signature sound. While Karen's voice gave life to the lyrics, it was Richard's vision, arrangements, and musical foundation that made their songs soar. From the earliest days of their collaboration, Richard displayed a deep and intuitive understanding of melody, harmony, and structure. His classical training, paired with an appreciation for pop, jazz, and easy listening, helped him craft songs that were rich yet accessible, sophisticated but never alienating. Richard had an innate ability to create arrangements that perfectly framed Karen's voice, elevating every note with subtle but powerful musical choices. In the late 1960s, while Karen was just beginning to explore her identity as a performer, Richard was already honing his skills as a composer and arranger. After moving to Downey, California, with their family in 1963, Richard pursued formal musical education. He enrolled in California State University, Long Beach, where he studied music and met future collaborator John Bettis, who would go on to co-write many of the Carpenters' most iconic songs. Together, Richard and Bettis began creating original material that blended their shared love for melody and storytelling. Richard's style was influenced by a variety of artists and composers, from the harmonic sophistication of Burt Bacharach to the choral textures of the Beach Boys. However, even as he drew inspiration from others, he developed a sound all his own: warm, layered, and emotionally resonant. By the time the Carpenters signed with A&M Records in 1969, Richard was ready. He took on the responsibility of producing and arranging their albums, a rare role for someone so young, especially in an era when artists typically relied on outside producers. But Richard had a clear vision for what he wanted their music to be. And when their 1970 album, Close to You, was released, that vision became a reality. The songs were elegant and timeless. They Longed to Be Close to You featured gentle horn lines and soft harmonies, while We've Only Just Begun unfolded with a quiet power, building from intimate piano to a sweeping finale. Behind each arrangement was Richard's meticulous hand, choosing every instrument, orchestrating every backing vocal, and ensuring that every note served the emotional arc of the song. As the Carpenters' fame grew throughout the early 1970s, so did Richard's role as a respected producer. He was known for his perfectionism in the studio, not in an overbearing way, but in pursuit of clarity, balance, and emotional resonance. His arrangements often featured layered vocal harmonies, lush string sections, and carefully constructed transitions that made the songs feel seamless and immersive. Richard also served as the Carpenters' pianist and keyboardist, both in the studio and on tour. His playing was precise, tasteful, and always supportive of the song's narrative. He understood the importance of dynamics, when to play softly and let Karen's voice shine, and when to bring the music forward to create contrast and drama. His contributions were often subtle, but they were essential. Beyond his musical talent, Richard was also a gifted interpreter of other people's songs. He had a knack for identifying material that could be reimagined through the Carpenters' lens. Songs like Superstar, Rainy Days and Mondays, and Goodbye to Love were either covers or inspired by earlier compositions. But under Richard's guidance, they became fresh, emotionally charged renditions that felt definitive. Take Superstar, for example. Originally recorded by Delaney and Bonnie and made famous by Rita Coolidge, Richard transformed it into a brooding, introspective ballad that showcased Karen's lower vocal register and conveyed a sense of longing rarely heard in pop music. The arrangement was spare yet haunting, with just enough space for Karen's voice to breathe. 4. Goodbye to Love. A song that not only demonstrated Karen's vocal control, but also introduced a distorted electric guitar solo into the middle of a soft ballad, something virtually unheard of at the time. That decision was Richard's, and it was bold. The fusion of soft pop with a rock-influenced solo created a striking contrast that would go on to influence countless artists in the years to follow. Throughout the 1970s, as the Carpenters' discography expanded, so did Richard's reputation in the industry. He earned the respect of peers and critics alike, not just for his technical skill, but for his commitment to musical excellence. While the mainstream music scene evolved to embrace disco, punk, and other louder genres, Richard remained true to the Carpenters' style, soft, reflective, and rooted in melody. Albums like A Song for You, Horizon, and A Kind of Hush continued to showcase his arranging prowess. Each project was approached with the same care and attention to detail, even as musical trends shifted. Richard believed in the power of timeless songwriting, and sought to create music that would endure beyond the decade. Richard's health struggles and issues about the Carpenters. In the mid-1970s, as the Carpenters enjoyed success, Richard began experiencing health and personal challenges that would ultimately impact his career. It became clear that these struggles, paired with pressures from being in the public eye, created a difficult period in his life. While Karen's battles with anorexia nervosa garnered significant attention, Richard also faced his own issues that led to difficulties both personally and professionally. Richard Carpenter's struggle with health problems became more apparent as time went on. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, he faced issues with his physical and mental well-being, including a battle with weight problems and exhaustion. The pressures of maintaining a public image, combined with the rigorous demands of touring and recording, contributed to Richard's declining health. In interviews, he later discussed how these struggles took a toll on his physical appearance and emotional stability. Fans and even the media began to notice a shift in Richard's once energetic and optimistic demeanor. One of the most notable aspects of Richard's issues stemmed from his constant struggle with body image. As someone who had been involved in the highly publicized world of music, he felt the intense pressure to maintain a certain look. His weight fluctuations became an area of concern, particularly when he gained a significant amount of weight during the late 1970s and early 1980s. The media, always keen on focusing on the personal lives of celebrities, zeroed in on this aspect of Richard's appearance. His weight became a topic of speculation, with some media outlets pointing to his growing size as a sign of his alleged emotional issues, rather than understanding the complex factors that led to his struggles. Beyond the personal challenges that Richard faced, his public image was also complicated by his role as the brother of Karen Carpenter, whose tragic battle with anorexia nervosa became a global story. The Carpenter family as a whole faced intense media attention during this time, with much of it focused on Karen's condition. However, Richard too was affected by the increased scrutiny of his personal and professional life. While Karen's anorexia was the focal point of the media's coverage, Richard's own challenges were often overshadowed or misunderstood. This public spotlight was not just limited to their physical appearances. It also extended to their music. In interviews, Richard would later express how the pressures of fame and success took a toll on both him and Karen, especially as they navigated the challenges of being part of a successful group while dealing with personal hardships. For Richard, the stress of managing his own health issues, combined with the immense public attention on Karen, created a difficult environment that was not always easy to handle. In addition to health and professional challenges, Richard faced another controversy when the Carpenters' music was suddenly seen as outdated. With the rise of new musical genres, some critics and fans suggested that the Carpenters' soft pop sound may have lost some appeal among younger audiences. While the duo had been adored for their soft melodies and soothing ballads, the changing tastes of the music scene presented a challenge for Richard and the group's continued success. Despite these challenges, Richard Carpenter managed to maintain his relevance in the music industry, particularly within the context of his work as a producer. Even as the spotlight shifted, he continued to create music that demonstrated his depth and skill as a composer and arranger. However, the overshadowing pressures of his public and personal struggles remained inescapable for him. Karen's failed marriage, allegedly concealed vasectomy, tragic death, and Richard speaking the truth. In 1980, Karen Carpenter's personal life took a dramatic turn when she married real estate developer Thomas James Burris. To many, this marriage seemed like a fresh start for the young pop star. However, what seemed like an escape from the pressures of fame quickly turned into a source of emotional turmoil and heartbreak. Karen had been through so much already: the constant public scrutiny of her weight and appearance, the pressure of living up to the success of the Carpenters, and the inner battles she fought with her self-image. However, marrying Burris wasn't the dream she had hoped for. Despite the apparent fairy tale wedding, their relationship was riddled with difficulties from the start. According to Richard Carpenter, one of the biggest shocks came when Karen discovered, after their marriage, that Burris had kept a major secret, his vasectomy, which she had not known about before they wed. Karen, who had always dreamed of having children, was devastated. In interviews, Richard Carpenter, Karen's brother and musical partner, explained that the revelation was a crushing blow to Karen. Karen wanted a family, and when she found out about Thomas's vasectomy, it devastated her. Richard said in an interview many years later. Their marriage became strained almost immediately. I don't think either of them were truly prepared for the reality of married life. Karen had always been a sensitive soul, and Thomas, well, he just wasn't the right fit for her. The constant public scrutiny and pressure from her career didn't help either, Richard continued. She spent a large sum on their wedding, trying to make it perfect, but it didn't take long for things to unravel. You could see that she was unhappy. Despite the personal strain, Karen tried to make the best of things. She did everything she could to make the marriage work, but as Richard described, the emotional toll began to show. Karen was a very giving person, but when she was hurt, she didn't know how to express herself. She kept it all inside, and that's one of the reasons why she struggled so much with her health, Richard remarked. The cracks in the marriage grew more evident as the months passed. Karen is said to have spent a significant amount on the wedding, attempting to create a picture-perfect experience. But the emotional toll and the hidden secrets soon became too much to bear. In interviews, Karen's close friends noted that she became more reclusive, retreating into herself and becoming increasingly quiet about her struggles. Their marriage lasted less than a year. By 1981, Thomas and Karen had separated. The emotional strain from the marriage and the failure to achieve her dream of starting a family led Karen into an even deeper emotional hole. The weight of these personal struggles compounded her existing battle with anorexia nervosa, a disorder that was not widely understood at the time. Richard Carpenter has since spoken about how hard it was to watch his sister go through such painful experiences. Karen was a very private person. She didn't want to talk about what she was going through. She kept a lot of things to herself, Richard said in one emotional interview. He also mentioned that the media had little understanding of what Karen was dealing with, often making cruel judgments about her appearance and behaviors. The public just didn't understand. They thought she was just another celebrity with an eating disorder, but they didn't realize the deep emotional turmoil she was experiencing. The press had a huge impact on her self-esteem. Despite her increasing reclusiveness, Karen sought professional help for her eating disorder starting in 1980. She began therapy and spent time in the hospital undergoing treatments that, at the time, were seen as experimental. These treatments included intravenous feeding and various medications, some of which may have exacerbated her condition. According to experts, Richard Carpenter reflected on this period. There were treatments being used at the time that we now know weren't the best. Unfortunately, Karen was caught up in a system that didn't fully understand her condition. By 1982, Karen's health had started to improve. Under strict medical supervision, she gained some weight, and there was hope for her recovery. However, it was a slow and difficult process. Richard stated, Karen wanted to recover, she really did. But it was always a battle, and she couldn't fully overcome it. The anorexia had taken such a deep hold on her. Then, in 1983, tragedy struck. On February 4th, Karen Carpenter passed away from heart failure, a result of complications related to anorexia nervosa. She was only 32 years old. The news of her death shocked the world, and it forced the public to acknowledge the severity of eating disorders, something that had not been widely discussed before Karen's passing. Richard Carpenter has spoken openly about the pain of losing his sister. In several interviews, he revealed the deep sense of loss and regret he felt in the wake of Karen's death. It's hard to express the feeling of losing someone so close. I wish there had been more we could have done for her, Richard said. It was devastating, not just as a brother, but as someone who had worked with her closely for so many years. The world lost someone incredibly talented and kind-hearted. Karen's death led to increased awareness about anorexia nervosa, particularly the connection between eating disorders and the pressures faced by public figures. Richard reflected on the impact Karen's death had on society. When Karen died, people started to talk more openly about eating disorders. It was something that wasn't talked about back then, but Karen's passing made people realize how serious the problem was. While Richard has faced some criticism and speculation over the years regarding the handling of Karen's struggles, he has consistently defended his sister's legacy. He believes that Karen's work with the Carpenters and her beautiful voice should be remembered, not just her battles. Karen was a star, yes, but she was also a person who went through a lot of personal pain. I hope people can look back at her life and appreciate her talent and the joy she brought to so many through her.